Through the Noise with your host, Ernesto Glucksmann.
Okay, thanks for jumping on the show, Tara. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. Tara Gupta, you're the founder of Anamakos. Is it Anamakos just straight, or is it like real estate, something or other tagline to it? It's just Anamakos.
We're just called Anamakos, but we are a sustainable regenerative real estate developer.
And you're two things, right? Because you're also a co-founder of Map-Collective. So let's start with Anamakos. Sorry.
Because complicated name, yeah.
Anamakos. Well, where does Anamakos, the name, come from? Where did that came from?
That actually is sort of a made-up name from Anamakos, which is the basis. So my background is Hindu yoga in my upbringing, but one of the ideologies or one of the ideas that exists in yoga and in the Vedas is that there are 5 bodies to existence. And the base body, or the physical body, before you get to the mental body, the breath body, other energetic bodies and layers of existence, is the physical body. And this is called the Anamakos. And when the physical body is in order, the idea is that the rest of the bodies can then be in order, can flourish. So our idea behind Anamakos is to create the physical in a way that it will be in order and it will help people who are living in that community flourish.
Man, I'm intrigued by the philosophy, because I feel like my body and my mind are constantly in disarray, mostly because I have 2 little ones to manage through, that have been managing through this past couple of years with COVID. When I was looking you up, I was super impressed because you have a degree from the Rhode Island School of Design. So you're an artist, filmmaker background. And then I see this hardcore MBA from Georgetown. So it's like, okay, I got to talk to this person. She's not just like the artistic, whatever you want to think about, bringing artistic to life. You have the rigor of an MBA on top of that, the finance stuff. And then I realized, okay, well, this is why she's a founder of these interesting projects. So let's go into the project itself, like the Anamakos project and business that you have. So it's related to sustainable living concepts, right? Into a home. And you have a home where you're sort of bringing these sustainable living practices into fruition, right?
Yeah, so we modeled out a small project in Providence that was a 7-unit project, just to sort of toy with these ideas. But that was from 2018 to 2020.
Okay.
Currently, we've been vetting out different potential properties in order to actually establish the first DC project that we'll do. And we're looking to basically implement the ideas of regenerative development, of circular economy, and inspire a biophilic transformation of the city through careful positioning of several different projects throughout the city. So
biophilic is the art part of it, right?
That is actually the design part of it. So the circular economy principles, that's really about the supply chain. That's about the materiality. That's about what we actually put into the building itself, and how we think about the fact that construction is one of the most wasteful industries. How do we actually address that problem in how we build, how we develop, how we design? So we're really, really invested in thinking about the waste in that stream. And we also are really invested in creating spaces that are wonderful to live in. Why do people actually get drawn to what is called sustainable design? Sometimes the building's look and feel is just as important. And so when we're creating sustainable design, we don't want to create like these hard, brutalist structures that don't feel like they're sustainable. We also want to pay attention to that side, which is the design side, which is the biophilic side. So we combine both. And the idea is that then by having that look and feel that inspires people directly every day, and having that knowledge that, yes, actually we are a circular economy principles building, we are beyond LEED. We are actually thinking about things like water positive action, gray water recycling. We're thinking about things like having compost and waste to energy systems integrated into the building. Then that supports those ideologies that are already triggered by the design.
Okay. So one of my working theories is, as you know, one of the potential sustainability, I don't know, objections is it's just going to cost more. It's going to be more difficult. It's going to be hard to do things where we have to like account for everything, every scrap that we put into the system and make sure we're reusing and not just throwing away materials or single use applications, right? But the counter to that, my working theory, and I'm not an expert in this space, but my working theory, and this is where I want you to chime in on, is going through the rigor of trying to get to a circular economy, of trying to get more sustainable development design, of trying to think through what happens with the outputs. What do you do with that? And how do you repurpose that? That rigor is what ends up creating more efficiencies that you never even knew you had, right? It's kind of what I like to think of it. How true am I to the reality, given that you do these types of projects? Like, how is that true? Is that a working theory that we can explore? What are your thoughts on that?
So you're saying in the process of actually pursuing sustainability on a project, you actually can understand how to break down expenses or how to actually make it financially feasible? Is that what you're saying?
All of the above, like the entity that, so you have two similar developers, they're going to do a similar project of the size that you're looking at. One of them is just going to build something as fast as possible, the cheapest way possible, and then dump the stuff that they don't need or whatever in the process, not really thinking through where they're sourcing materials. You, on the other hand, are going to go through extra steps, right, to make sure that the stuff's reused appropriately, that you're creating processes in the whole thing, that you're acquiring materials or whatever for the build out from sustainable sources. The rigor of that is going to make there's going to be value within that exceeds not just like, oh, we have a sustainable living environment, but we've learned more about what we can affect, and that the building is also more efficient, and that our processes are more efficient, and that we, in the long run, save more energy.
Well, a lot of what the benefit of sustainability is, especially on the financial side, and we make the financial case both for Anamakos and for Map-Collective when we do projects. We make the financial case for sustainability. But a lot of what is involved there is going to be about longevity. So one of the tools we use that we're including in our capital stack and how we're pursuing our capital stack for these upcoming projects is CPACE. So it's a program where you will be incentivized to do direct sustainable improvements, but you will have to hold the property for at least 5 years. So you're not just building and selling, you're actually not doing a direct like just development and then selling off as quickly as you can. You have to actually stabilize for 3 years or so. Maybe you develop for 2 years, you stabilize the property for 3 years, and then you can sell, but that's really the minimum. Otherwise, you're incentivized to take a longer hold. But this specific type of financing will allow you to add onto a capital stack that already exists. And so you'll be able to lever the project more and therefore get higher returns. So there are different tools you can also use to compensate for the fact that you might be being really aggressive and really innovative. Anytime you're doing innovative things, you are probably going above and beyond to maybe invest extra money because it's a newer field, because it's still a place where there's R&D. Nobody has a solution to alternatives to concrete in a scalable way yet. We have different solutions that are out there, but nobody's really standardized it, I would say, right now. Like we're not all using hempcrete or anything. We're not all using chicken feather based concrete, you know? We're still using concrete. And so for those of us who are maybe experimenting with these alternative materials, it will maybe be a little bit more expensive in the beginning, but also if we're working with smaller scale providers, maybe we don't have much competition in how we're sourcing that. And we can argue for different pricing structures because of that. So there are trade-offs here. And like you said, it's really down when you're getting into the nitty-gritty details of how we orchestrate these relationships. But I think that definitely what we're looking at is, okay, how can we benefit from that long-term difference that we're making? How can we also benefit when we're doing adaptive reuse projects? So a lot of people argue adaptive reuse is way more expensive than ground-up development. And in a lot of cases, that's very true. It's sometimes really difficult to gut out a building or just to work with a building that you need to maintain the facade, or you have this historical element, but you actually have to do most of the work again, just because the building is not up to the standards that you need it to be, or you want it to be, whether design-wise, whether functionality-wise. But the advantage of that is you are reusing a lot of that material. You are being more sustainable overall. And that's why it's really necessary that we do have tools like CPACE right now that will incentivize us to do that.
You said C-case. What is C-case? Is that, what is that? Maybe I'm not.
That's a specific type of financing that is available as additional debt financing on your capital stack when you pursue a sustainable development project.
Oh, okay. There's some incentives there. Okay. Wow. And I mean, and then like the learnings in the details that you go through, these learnings presumably are the things that you end up repurposing for the next project down the road, right? You've kind of learned from the Providence project, and now you have a better eye for what's the type of project that can work for you in Washington, D.C., right? Yeah.
And designing and building within cities and looking at how you transform the city, it's a long-term process. I mean, Map-Collective, we consider ourselves a 50-year company at Map-Collective as well, even though it's a tech company, just because sustainability has to have that longevity. And when we're planning for 2030, 2050. But for Anamakos, I mean, it's also minimum 50 years, maybe 100 years, because we're looking at how do we transform cities over time. And so however we're starting, we're making sure that we're doing it diligently. We're making sure to choose the right locations. We're making sure that we actually are following these ideas that we've set out in the process, because there ends up being a lot of trade-offs when you're actually doing the development and when you're looking at, okay, what kind of choices can we make while still making the project viable, and pursuing all the goals that we really want to pursue.
Now, I want to ask about Map-Collective, but can we dive into like the experience of living in the vision for the living in this facility, or using it? I mean, is it going to be another home? I think your Providence one was like you had some folks living in there, and then everything that they did there was like related to make sure we can compost our food and not use plastics everywhere or whatever. I mean, what's this one like going to be about?
Yeah, and that one, I think we all had a lot of idealism. So it was positive in some ways, and it was also difficult in some ways, because it was also, since it was a smaller community, I couldn't set up the proper infrastructure to enable people to do it really easily. And honestly, the ways that we want to set them up in these new projects are to basically handhold people through that, so it's seamlessly easy. So you have like a composting chute, you have the waste to energy units on site, you have partnerships with different utility companies that are providing renewables, but also renewables on site if we need to. We have also relationships that will make the community more, since these are apartment buildings and they're going to be around 40 units or so for the residential aspects, then we're looking at, okay, it's a smaller scale apartment building, or if it is a larger scale one, mostly we'll be doing smaller scale to start off, such as a 40 unit. But we'll be looking at how do we actually create a social fabric that connects these different properties that we are developing across the city. So maybe having a community garden that everybody takes part in, different amenities that people can share in, but ways to connect the community so that there's a social fabric also around these ideas of sustainability.
Wow. Okay. So it's like you're creating a small community, and you're getting, you're going from a small apartment to now maybe like how many units you're looking at to type size?
So the unit count that we're looking at is around 40 for the projects that we're developing. We might do more of a mixed use, but we're looking at a couple of potential sites right now.
I mean, that's large. That's 40 people to then, it's like a collective. Is it going to be like a collective, or how does it get structured with these people, when you have tenants at that point?
Yeah. So, I mean, they're not really taking part in a collective per se. It's more just that they're living in an apartment building that is ultra sustainable and catering to their needs in terms of doing everything that the building that they live in can in order to be sustainable. And that accounts for materiality. That accounts for the operations, the fact that all recycling systems will be there. It will be basically enabling them in every way to do the things that otherwise when people want to be sustainable in their buildings, sometimes it's like an uphill battle for them to fight against it, to, get compost delivery services that come to their door. And there are great services in DC, but we might collaborate with them so that it's easier, so that perhaps we have a better system that then enables everybody to compost more easily. So like small things like that will be about the amenities and about the operations aspects. But then also larger things.
Designing around the services and designing around those services to enable those services to more easily, more conveniently be available to the tenants that are going to end up living in these places. Okay. That's interesting. And then, and so are you partnering up with like developers, or this is all on your own? Like how, it seems like a large project to go from what you had in Providence to this. This is a big jump, right?
Yeah. And so we're working with a local development group called Clear Real Estate Services, and they're great. They've worked extensively around the DC area. So they've been working on projects 200 mil plus for a while, for about 20 years in the area. And we're confident that with them, we can definitely accomplish these goals.
Okay. Well, let's shift real quick to then Map-Collective. What's that project about?
So Map-Collective is a carbon tracking and supply chain transparency platform and certifying body. So what we do is we provide carbon tracking through our carbon plan program, which is an annual program that allows us to work with businesses and governments to make sure that they have a baseline carbon footprint. They have their current year and historical carbon footprints, and then they have future projections. So they have a projection to be net zero by 2030, or if they want to be more aggressive, then we work with them to make sure that they can get to net zero before that, if that's something they wish to do. But then also beyond net zero, because net zero is really, it's not how we're going to really stabilize the planet. We need to actually go beyond in order to create that resilience and create a fertile ground that allows us to really flourish here. So in order to pursue that drawdown beyond that, then we work with them to say, okay, what are the goals of your industry? How does that fit into the larger global framework of planetary boundaries, and how much drawdown we as a planet need to be pursuing? What kind of carbon sinks do we need to be supporting? What might even be related to your industry that you could be investing in? So that's the kind of goals that we help support beyond net zero.
So is it like you can register with your Map-Collective, you're going to register your profile, and then you work with you guys to help establish those goals and then build towards them?
Side that basically you can list if you already have your carbon footprint, but then we won't be working with you on the goals very directly in that way. But if they are in the carbon plan program, which is what the way that we're working with most businesses and governments currently, then that will be something that we're doing with them. We're really taking them through that to annually assess, okay, where have you been? Where are you going? What do you really want to do here? How are you going to make this financially viable for your company? How are you going to make this really a point of success? Are you going to be a pioneer in this way? We have one cannabis company we work with that they're one of the first to really be mapping their footprint in such a significant way. And now, due to that first stage of work, they've set a goal of net zero by 2025, which is great.
Okay. And then this carbon plan program, like somebody from there's just going to be a lot of people that don't know about any of these things. Like if that may own a business listening in, what's that about? Like how do I sign up, or what's that process like?
Yeah. So we take a first evaluation call. We do a booking call.
Okay.
And after that, we are able to evaluate, okay, where are you currently? What are the ways in which we can help you? And then how can we set you up for the program? But a lot of these companies, especially product-based companies, consumer packaged goods, apparel, energy companies, even cannabis. So we're looking at a lot of these different organizations and a lot of governments as well who are setting climate action plans that are ideal for this, that really need to be able to have that plan set out, even if they're a small business, because then they can plan from the get-go, from whatever stage they're at, and make sure that they're setting up their supply chains in a resilient way so that they're not affected by a black swan event like COVID in the way that a lot of supply chains were.
I mean, how much could we have planned for that Black Swan event, right? Like, how much did we?
Yeah, so what you do is you can actually create agility and resilience in the way that you map and the way that you understand your supply chain. And so if you do that avoids breakage then. Obviously, there is, to a degree, when we have structured our global supply chains as we have, now we're seeing in retrospect, in hindsight, that, okay, perhaps we should have structured them a bit differently. But that's how we are understanding it now, and we can use that information from this major Black Swan event to move forward. And the body of supply chain knowledge and supply chain planning has already been pretty active around this, around how we create agility. It's just a matter of also matching that knowledge and education with the businesses that are actually operating these supply chains.
How do you respond to somebody saying, like, if they were pushed back and they were like, well, I'm just a small business. Like, I'm just a little consultancy. I do some web design stuff for somebody. Like, this sounds like this is like, mapping my supply chain out better in a more resilient way is like in the realm of Elon Musk. Like, only those guys can do that. They have the money to create their own things. How do you do it? Like, is this tangible enough for a small business to do it?
I wouldn't advise it for them. If they're like a small consultancy or they're a service-based business, I wouldn't advise them to do any supply chain mapping. If they are a product-based business, even if they're small, then they might really be reliant on whatever product. If they're selling one product, they might really be reliant on that. It might be really helpful because that can make or break their business. Okay, if they have their supply chain set up in a resilient way, I sell only one type of bar of soap that I make, but I like to get this part of it, this lavender from this farm. I'd like to get this. I don't know what that might look like for them, but making sure that they can still get those ingredients and there's agility in that can be done really. I mean, we do it very affordably for small businesses. We're not saying that, we're going to charge the same as we're going to charge for a large business who's doing it. And that's why we've scaled it in order to make this accessible for small businesses too, because they should have access to these tools as well. It shouldn't be something that you only get access to once you've already scaled to the place where you're like, okay, now let's backtrack. We've already set up our supply chains, but now we realize that we need some agility in it. So now we have to kind of backtrack and do everything sort of retrospectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes that. I think that's the key, right? It's sort of you're looking back, like maybe before you use your soap example. You were getting your raw materials from one supplier. You just go on his website and they send you the materials, and you never thought about it. Now you're probably thinking, if you go through, how resilient is your supplier, you might want to go back and say, well, can I contract with you for longer term supply? But then if you're going to contract with that guy, you're going to also want to ask, well, how do I know that you can actually get the raw materials that you need to make sure that I get the soap that I need at the next Black Swan event? Like, you just merely even beginning to ask those questions back to your suppliers and deciding, well, maybe I need to like diversify or have a longer term contract or just have a really honest conversation with those suppliers. You're just like, I think if there's some benefit to what COVID has done to the world, is it's gotten a lot of people thinking about this. Like, okay, we can't just presume that our supply chains will not be affected by the next thing, whatever it is. We have to be more, well, I guess to use your word, resilient, right?
And a lot of people think about it in the sense of like localizing supply chains or grounding supply chains or having alternative providers that are locally sourced. So that also makes it easier for greater resilience overall as well. So a lot of our global supply chain and these larger supply chains are the ones that had breakage.
Right. All the shipping, the ones that are shipping stuff across the world, they still have issues right now. It seems like it's going to continue for quite some time. What got you into all this line of work? Like how did you decide that you were going to get into real estate and sustainable development and all this type of stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, it was a couple of professors who really got me hooked on urban planning and really the ideas of systems solutions. So I think that's really what got me invested in urban planning and in architecture and like the built environment as a mechanism for for arts also, and for arts, healing, and climate change solutions all in one. And so the built environment is really, I mean, we're in it every day in such a major way. So for me, I grew up as a painter. I've been painting since I was 5. And it's an extension of that art for me. It's really a wonderful extension to be working sculpturally with buildings in that way. And that's why the design elements are so important to me. I think that plus the materiality and really looking at, okay, how do we actually construct the places we're living in a way that's healthy and balanced, not only for our bodies, but also for the body of Earth and the organism we actually live on. And that is something that I think is just essential and logical when you're thinking about creating life on this planet. And for Map-Collective, it's another extension of that. It's really thinking about, okay, well, as a visual person, I want to visualize what's going on. You know, there's a problem here. I want to visualize what these limits are, you know, because we actually have a limit to the amount of carbon we can have in the atmosphere. We need to move that carbon back into the other spheres. And so when we visualize it, we can understand, okay, it's like a health parameter. How much carbon is here? How much carbon do we need to be elsewhere? How do we move that around? What does that look like? Who are the players involved? It's gamification. And so that really is what excites me about it.
Right. And I guess the MBA was to then get you the rigor, right? Because to be able to measure what it is you're doing in a sense, in a rigorous manner, right? Or, or can you just tell me more about that MBA program? Because it sounds really intriguing to me.
Yeah, Georgetown actually is awesome because they are very service-oriented. They're very CSR connected, which, I mean, a lot of the people we work with through Map-Collective is our CSR professionals, our chief sustainability officers, so people who are really focused on these aspects of the business. And a lot of Georgetown grads are really, as McDonough grads specifically, are really engaged with that because they are service-minded. Because that's something that the school reinforces again and again in its curriculum and its extracurriculars. So it's really interesting to be part of that community and really supportive for this in particular. The network is also amazing. Such supportive people. I don't know if I've even met as supportive an alumni group, as supportive a cohort of students as well. So I think that that's probably what really contributed. And the financial rigor as well is something I needed because I really wanted to make sure that we're laying out the business in a way that is structurally strong. RISD is great. I think like I was very right-brained there. And so it's easy to go far right brain and then, you want to balance yourself out a little left brain in order to really make sure that the organization that you're building, whatever you're creating is fully rounded. So that was my desire there.
Yeah, I mean I don't think that's a common thing necessarily. I think that's a unique perspective. So I think that's what makes you Ms. Gupta, founder of these two types of programs, right? Like I think that's key, and I think it'll, I'm sure that MBA cohort of MBAers that you went through are going to be there for life as you kind of evolve your thinking and your expertise. So. But before, I mean, man, time's almost flying here with us, but where are you at now overall with your projects? Like, what do you, if you need something, what is the thing you need now that you could use a hand with?
I mean, right now we are at a scaling stage with both of them. So for Anamakos, we're bringing in equity partners. We're looking for new projects, new sites. We're working with a variety of different architects. So anyone on that front, materials that are really interesting, looking at alternative materials like alternatives to concrete, ways that we can address the waste process in construction, different ideas around that we might not have been exposed to. We've been exposed to cradle, circular economy, that kind of thing. Frameworks, living building framework as well, LEED framework. So also looking for Map-Collective, where we're growing in a massive way in terms of offering the carbon plan to a variety of different companies and governments, offering our supply chain 360 annual program as well to companies. and making sure that we can get the word out there, help companies understand how they can actually help themselves through this, how they can make themselves more resilient. So anyone who people think would be interested or a good fit for that, please feel free to send over.
And that's kind of a per project, kind of like a consulting project, service project, that kind of helps you feed this other project while you look for your equity partners and so forth. Is that about right? Like the Map-Collective work that you do there. I mean,
they're pretty much separate, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're kind of just they're related in that they both address climate change, but they're also separate in a lot of ways. So, I mean, Anamakos, we'll probably do some mapping. We'll probably map the carbon footprint of the buildings that we work with through Map-Collective because we have that service already.
Mm-hmm.
But Map-Collective is its own entity, its own process, and working really on that carbon mapping aspect for businesses. And Anamakos is its own process. We're working with a variety of different partners there and establishing DC, but also talking to other countries, also talking to other locations, cities. Was just talking with somebody who was discussing a place in Malaysia that might be ideal for this type of project. So anyone who has land, who's looking also for development of this type, that would be really vertical forest oriented, looking at an uber sustainable way of developing. That's something that we do and that we'd be happy to partner with people in interesting places.
How do you see the from where you sit, what's the marketplace opportunity for this type of, well, for either one of these types of businesses overall? If there are other folks, doing better for humanity and the environment, the local environment. I mean, those should just be like core noble causes that should be in every business. Like that's how you do better business, right? Like I don't understand how you could do the opposite. It doesn't make any sense to me. At the least worst, you're going to have a bad PR situation eventually. And at the worst, you're going to be harming the very people that you're trying to like help, those around you. Right. So it's like, I don't get it. But in terms of what the marketplace exists for other map collectives or other Amakos that are out there, what does it look like from you? Is it exciting world or what?
Yeah, there's a lot of different players. We work in a very collaborative way. So we're trying to collaborate with a lot of the different people who we find interesting in the space. But I mean, the carbon footprint management market is supposed to be about 12.2 billion by 2025. So it's definitely not a small place to be operating in. 3.7 billion of that is supposed to be for solutions and services in the carbon footprint management services alone. And so that's really what our product falls into. And so that itself is also a huge market. There are a couple of players that are similar to us, but really it's the need is so strong right now that we see it as a collaborative effort. The need is so strong, and there's only so many of us out there right now.
So, when I look at this, when I see these numbers, these are big numbers, but in the grand scheme of things, it still feels a lot. And I follow Tesla probably way too much, but it's like, oh, Tesla and the EV market is just huge potential. And they only have about 2% of the global cars right now. 2% are EV cars out there. The 98% is still there left to be turned over. And I just feel like these types of numbers for where you're at is exactly the same spot. You're probably 1% of potential, even though these are large numbers to be involved in. It's not a small lake of any kind, So it's sort of like, you probably want to get into it now if you're thinking of doing anything like this, because there's a community, there's still this collaborative feel. You get to be a potential real player in this pond that is going to have to explode. I mean, it's just not like this has to grow much faster. And I think we're all pretty much, anybody that reads the news pretty much is aware that we're not anticipating the effects quite right. And this seems like every terrible news piece about climate change is that it keeps accelerating beyond our own projections. So guess what? Eventually, we're going to have to pour hundreds of billions, maybe $1 trillion or $2 trillion into this world. So Tara, I commend you. I think you're in a bright spot. If I were to take a guess, I think you're in a real kind of spot of potential growth for both of your projects.
Thank you.
So yeah,
it was awesome to chat with you.
Yeah, totally. Okay, if somebody wants to find out, let's just give it, because there's most people are listening to it on the podcast. Like, give us the URLs for both of these to find you.
So Anamakos is ANAMAKOS.com, anamakos.com. And Map-Collective is MAP-collective, COLLECTIVE.com. So map-collective.com.
Don't forget the dash on that one. Best of luck, Tara. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks so much.
For more episodes of Through the Noise, go to throughthenoise.us.